Hi, I'm Leah Gunn Barrett. I write the blog Dear Scotland, and I'm here on the Scotland channel to talk about some of the things that I've written about recently and things that perhaps I haven't and will do in the future. So welcome. So yes, it's interesting. The Scottish population seems very much up in arms about what's happening in Gaza. I can't compare to what's happening in England, but I know living up here that the Scottish Palestine Solidarity campaign is very, very active, along with other groups. And there was a large protest in Edinburgh on the 19th of July. And of course, the well-known incident that the BBC even reported of the three Scottish women driving a truck into the perimeter fence of the Leonardo arms manufacturer facility here in Edinburgh, because Leonardo makes F-35 components, laser components, and other things which are sent to Israel to carry out the genocide against the Palestinian people. So this is something that seems to really exercise Scots in particular. And sometimes I wonder if this kind of passion could then translate over into self-determination for Scotland, because really we are captured, we are subservient to UK foreign policy, which is run by a bunch of Zionists. Keir Starmer is a clear Zionist, and half of his cabinet are members of Labour Friends of Israel. They're the ones pushing this policy. They eliminated some of the arms transfers, or looking at 8% of the arms deals that we send to Israel. But that's really not good enough. We need a total arms embargo, but that's just not going to happen under this regime. So Scotland, if it actually wants to have an independent foreign policy and not support through the UK government a genocide and many other of the horrors that the UK government foreign policy has perpetrated, then we need to have self-determination of the Scottish people so we can actually have our own foreign policy and other things that a real government would have. But this all feeds into how the UK government has cracked down on what they call a terrorist organization, Palestine Action, which is a joke, clearly. This is a protest group of concerned citizens who are, trying to make the point that we're not okay with the UK sponsoring a rogue Zionist regime in the Middle East who's carrying out a genocide. And we're actually aiding and abetting it, and we're complicit in it, along with the United States. Maybe not to the extent that the United States is, but we're right in there with them, as well as most of the European Union. So this is horrendous. But I think if you step back and look at why we're in this position and why we feel powerless to actually change anything, it's because we don't have we're not a sovereign state, and we can't formulate our own foreign policy and have some kind of moral foundation or underpinning, and just saying this is not okay with the Scottish people. But the kind of government that we need is not a Westminster mini-me in Holyrood, where you've got everything centralized and the Scottish government decides everything. But what you need is a system where power is devolved down to the regions and the localities across Scotland. And that's where you can actually get the expression of popular sovereignty, which is Scotland's constitutional basis. But you need that kind of organization, representation, bringing government as close to the people as possible. Not only would you be able to then have a moral foreign policy that actually benefits Scotland and perhaps the world, but you could also solve some of the many problems. I mean, there seems to be, wherever you look now, there are issues, whether it's the Ardrossan Harbour, whether it's the out-of-control onshore wind farms that are all corporate-owned because the UK privatized all of our energy back in the 90s, whether it's nuclear weapons polluting the Clyde and our land and our water, having nuclear power plants imposed on us against our will that we don't need, not being able to have the money or the wherewithal to fix our broken transport system, to invest in our infrastructure, to make sure we have a robust health service, that education is well funded, that we don't have 25% of our children living in poverty. And to recognize what our greatest natural resource is, or not, it is natural. We are natural human beings. And sometimes I wonder if we are, but humans, people, the people are the best resource that a nation has. If you don't invest in your people, and this is something the UK government is clueless about clearly, because they don't prioritize the welfare of the people. But I think Scotland, if it had self-determination and its own sovereign government, and the people were actually in charge, as they should be under a system of popular sovereignty, then yes, you would naturally prioritize the well-being of the people because they would insist that you do so. So that's why, I think that stepping back from the horrors that we're witnessing in Gaza, it feeds back to the same sort of central problem that we do not have autonomy. We don't have an independent voice or the power to exercise that. So the SNP sitting down on the green benches in Westminster, expressing outrage. I mean, how many years have we been listening to this? And what's changed? Absolutely nothing. And unfortunately, the SNP, I don't believe, is the vehicle to get us out of this mess of a failing union. Political parties never are, let's be honest. So it really comes down to the people. And I've been working with a group called Respect Scottish Sovereignty because that is what it's all about. Our sovereignty is not being respected. People actually maybe don't even realize that we are sovereign. And what does sovereign mean? It means making your own decisions. And I think taking these local issues like the groups that met up in Inverness to protest the out-of-control onshore wind development, the wind farms, and they sent a letter to John Swinney asking for a moratorium on wind farm development, just to sit back and look at it and think about, is there actually a plan? How can local communities benefit as opposed to be harmed by these developments, which they are at the moment? And of course, Swinney, being the ultimate tool of Westminster, devolved whatever he is, just poured cold water on their concerns. And this is not acceptable. He dismissed them. And this would not happen if we had a system of decentralized direct democracy along the lines of a country, say, like Switzerland, where each of their regions has their own constitution, as well as there being a federal constitution, and it operates under this principle called subsidiarity, which means anything that can be done at a lower level should not be done at a higher level. Because people ultimately know what it is they need and that they want, and that they have the wherewithal and the ability to actually make those things happen, from policing to education to energy, local community energy development, to maintaining your roads and all of that, then they should be able to do that. The federal government should only be there for national defense, for foreign policy, and for various things like that. But of course, ultimately accountable to the regions and the people. And this kind of model, I think, would fit Scotland extremely well. And that's why we've been pushing it. And if people can make that connection between the local problems that they're facing and their frustration, which is just becoming almost hard to contain, is bursting out. But they have to see that the way to actually channel that is to say, look, this is what we're demanding. We actually are sovereign, and we need to have our those mechanisms in place in the future Scotland to actually exercise that sovereignty. But we demand it. And if enough people are demanding it, then the politicians will cave. So we're pushing Holyrood to implement, which I guess I'm not optimistic they're going to do, but at least we're putting it out there and trying to paint them into a corner, a United Nations covenant, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Because Article 1 of that covenant is that every people have the right to self-determination. That's Article 1. Article 25 is about direct political rights, the right to have referendums and initiatives. And those are the tools that you need under a system of popular sovereignty and direct democracy. And we have over 7,200 signatures on the petition, not nearly good enough, but it's on the Scottish Parliament website. And it's been given the cold shoulder by Swinney and Angus Robertson, who I believe is an MI5 plant, probably Swinney is too. But if enough people use their voice and demand this all over Scotland, and the people who are running the Highlands, the anti-pylons campaign, the people on Ardrossan Harbor, the people who are opposing, nuclear weapons, C&D Scotland. There are so many local problems. The fact that, our roads are not fit for purpose, the out of control development of, having lots of people come over the border from our neighboring our neighbor England, and buying up property and land and pricing native Scots out of their own land. The fact that our universities are not even for Scottish students, that there are money machines for foreign students, including English students, to come to Scotland and then bugger off after 4 years. And it's just not, I believe these things are public goods and they should be there for the benefit of the Scottish people. And you're only going to get that if you have the people actually in charge. So that's why I've always argued about inverting the pyramid, the power pyramid, from the traditional pyramid to bringing the people back on top and letting them exercise their popular sovereignty over their government. So that to me is the key, but then getting that message across to Scots is, of course, painstaking and very, very difficult, especially when you have a media that is corporate controlled. And it's very hard to get, these kinds of messages across to people. Your channel, Scotland Channel, is heroically trying to do that in my own small way with my Dear Scotland blog. The National, to a certain extent, does it, but don't forget that it's owned by Gannett NewsQuest, which is owned by Gannett, which is a U.S. Huge media conglomerate. So this is the problem. We don't actually have a media where people can actually go and get the truth about what's actually happening. And I think that's a big reason why people are turning off. And I predict that the 2026 Holyrood election is going to be a bloodbath for the SNP because they've done absolutely nothing to try to galvanize the Scottish people and let them know that they're actually on their side, because I don't believe they are. If they were, they would certainly embrace something like the UN covenant, this human rights covenant that the UK, by the way, ratified back in 1976, but has done nothing about putting into UK law. Well, why would they? Self-determination, direct political rights. No, they're not interested in that. But the little secret that we're now confronting the Scottish government administration with is that the Scottish Parliament has the power. It's had the power all along. The Scotland Act 1998 expressly says in Schedule 5 that implementing international human rights agreements is not devolved or is not reserved. So it is fully within the power of the Scottish Parliament to implement this agreement, and then we're off to the races. But they won't do that. Angus Robertson says it's extending the power of Parliament. Wrong. You know what it's doing? It's extending the power of the people, and that's what they don't want. Politicians don't trust the people, and they will only respond, these strange creatures that we call politicians, to pressure. And that's where we have to actually start doing, is applying pressure to get them to act. Otherwise, they're not going to do it. So I think one of the most salient and recent examples of how direct democracy can benefit the Scottish people, if you go back to 1994, do you remember England privatized all of its water? Apparently, only 2 other countries have done that. Argentina recently did. You know who they sold their water to? To the Israeli government. Because Milei is a crazy Zionist, and Chile privatized their water. But England is the only other country on earth that has done this besides these 2 Latin American countries. And that's because water is a public good. So in 1994, when the Conservatives down in London under Thatcher wanted to come for, it was actually Major, I guess, at that point, come for Scotland's water, the Strathclyde Regional Council, which is the most powerful council in Scotland at the time, organized a public referendum. And it was very simply asking the Scottish voters, do you want your water private or keep it public? And the vote was overwhelmingly in favor, 97.2%, of keeping it in public hands, and a huge voter turnout as well. So that was done through a referendum. Now, that's why we keep pushing on direct democracy, because that's what direct democracy is. It's the power of the people to trigger and launch a referendum on an issue that they consider to be important. Or if there's something that is not being done, that needs to be done, the government's not looking at, you can launch a popular initiative. So these are the essential tools of decentralized direct democracy. Now, what happened after we managed to save, because Westminster backed off after that vote, is they then 2 years later, John Major, what did he do? He abolished the Strathclyde Regional Council, and you had, now you've got very large, ineffective uh, councils all over Scotland that are not really accountable to the people, and that's done by design. That's done by design. Um, so we need to actually get back to having accountability return to the people, and a much more sort of decentralized government and council structures in place if you're going to have popular sovereignty. Um, so yes, the Disunited Kingdom, how long do we have? I think much depends on how much people are willing to take. I think that we are very close to mass social unrest. I mean, just look at the data. Well, even though it's imperfect and doctored probably by the UK government, but nevertheless, people know that they're not doing well. Uh, there's rising poverty across the UK. Formerly, people who were middle class no longer are. There's particularly egregiously childhood poverty. There's out of control immigration coming into the UK, which is changing the character of the nations within the UK against the will of the people. There is obviously the cost of living is unsustainable for many people, job insecurity, a whole bunch of social issues and problems. And then, of course, you've got the international situation where the UK is still strutting around the world stage as though it has, some kind of importance and power, and it's just a vassal of the United States. And that's clearly not going to be sustainable. In fact, the whole European Union project, I think, is in danger of collapse because it's become increasingly authoritarian. And we're coming to the end of the road, really, with neoliberal capitalism. I think is really what's happening, and financial capitalism, which is a rentier economy, where the economy no longer makes things that are productive. There's no investment going on for local communities. Small and medium-sized businesses are not getting loans from banks because the big banks are so concentrated. All they're interested in doing is loaning for big projects, which is basically asset purchases, land, buildings, things that don't actually contribute value to the real economy. So that's kind of at the heart of it all. And it is not sustainable. It will eventually come crashing down. So for people to understand that is coming, it is definitely coming, I believe. And it is even coming for a country as big as the United States, where there's tremendous dissatisfaction domestically because the US government, like the UK government, has been captured by, corporate interests, corporatocracy, and also the Zionist lobby, which is very influential. And they're not representing the American people. That's why Americans don't have health insurance. So it's entirely possible that a country as large as the United States could eventually break up into smaller pieces. And I don't think that would be a bad thing, frankly, because I think smaller countries do better and they're more accountable to their populations. And so that, if you look at the disunited kingdom, it is an artificial construct. And who's really running things? It's the British, the English establishment, right? We have to, our politicians in Scotland have to pay obeisance to an English king, sausage fingers. He comes up here and spends a month of August at Balmoral and struts around in his kilt. I mean, really, it's just it's a bit silly, after really, that we even tolerate this. So I think we have to be ready. Scotland, the Scottish people need to be ready for the eventual demise, breakup, whatever, of this disunited kingdom, because it's not going to last that much longer. But we would need to be careful that we replace it with something that is going to actually serve the interests of the Scottish people. And that's why you almost need to go back, before the Treaty of Union, when Scotland did have a semblance of local governance, the boroughs, the towns. We owned our ports, we owned our assets, we owned our land. And yes, Scotland was a poor nation, but Norway was poor too. And now look at it, because it broke away from Sweden and it has its own government, and it struck oil just like Scotland did, but they kept their oil and set up a sovereign wealth fund and invested in the country and the people. And they have 400 local authorities and we have 32. So there's far more local democracy in Norway. And that's the kind of model that we could be. Scotland could be an incredibly rich, successful, happy, prosperous, independent country. And so I see, as an American with my eyes, the potential, which is breathtaking, and get extremely frustrated that a lot of Scots can't see it. Many do. But again, I think presenting a positive vision of the future, and then how you actually get there, and putting the people in charge, and why the people don't trust their government and the government doesn't trust the people. Well, it's obvious, because the government is not acting in the interests of the people, and it only will if the people are demanding it and actually have the power to hold government to account. And that's why, you need to decentralize power down to the lowest level and let the people make the decisions, because they ultimately know what's best for them.